Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Hall, and this is George Turner. We're from the University of Roehampton. We're doing a bit of a double act today, the great legendary Turner and Hall. I'm going to do the first bit, which is going to just give you a little background of where we were from the first inklings of GDPR up to really getting into the project and really moving forward. And then George will go beyond that into the specifics of how we did our GDPR project, how we're continuing doing it, and those specific areas that are to us as a higher educational institution. So many years ago, there was little rumblings that they were going to update the Data Protection Act. There was only little whispers. There was some reactions to what Google were doing, what Facebook were doing. There's a few of us here who was already worried about this harvesting of data. And so in the, sort of the IT world, we thought this could be good. Data Protection Act was okay, but wasn't really covering everything. Then the hushed tones of GDPR started going around the IT forums and security forums of the education world. It sent my IT security manager into realms of ecstasy about all this new kit, all this new stuff, all this new, lovely security software and things he'll have to do. He told me stories, Python-esque stories, of CIOs are going to be dragged down like the Spanish Inquisition into jail, locked up, because we hadn't protected our data. I obviously got a bit worried at that point, thinking, So I looked in a little bit more, and it was still a bit hazy. We weren't quite sure what it was, but it was coming. So I started raising the awareness in the organisation, and to which I got, the data protection, phase 2. We'll deal with that later. We're worried about our student numbers. So the next couple of years go by. Once again, I've got my security manager coming back. By this time, he is frantic. I'm getting shopping lists. I'm getting future projections of what we're going to need to do on our firewalls, intrusion systems, etc. I take those to my board, and they come back with, too expensive, it's data protection. We'll deal with it later. It's the real thing. Then it hits the finance and legal forums. Suddenly, our legal department are there. They're worried. They're seeing reams of work. They're seeing legislation. They're seeing contracts. They're seeing all this bit that's going to be terrible. We're not compliant. There's going to be hell. It's going to break down. Finance. They've suddenly realised there could be a cost. A very big cost. It hasn't been defined yet, but that cost was enough to worry them. So they come to me and were saying, what's all this about? So I started discussing about what we knew. It went down quiet for a bit. Then, next wave came in. Dates started being set. They started mentioning the May deadline. This is only just over a year and a half away. This lens suddenly gets the attention of the VC and the board. Suddenly it's out there. It's a big thing. It's the most important thing on our agenda other than student numbers. So, how do we, in education, solve a problem like GDPR? Well, higher education is a collegiate area. We believe in groupthink, peer review. So what do we do? So, we decided to form 2 working parties and a committee. The first working party was a group of people who actually worked with the data on a day-to-day basis. So they were set the task of meeting regularly to discuss the problem of how we solve GDPR. So after a number of weeks, many meetings, lots of papers, we come to the conclusion they didn't actually know. They'd sat there and they were seeing this Python-esque hell of the Spanish Inquisition and how they could not do their jobs. The world will end. They couldn't process students. They couldn't do alumni. They could not do research because the world will end with data. So in comes the second working party. Let's get the senior managers together. So there we are, all in the room, looking at what the other working party have done. Thought, we can sort this out. So we sat along, we talked, and we realised we didn't actually know what GDPR was, other than this cataclysmic legislation that was going to hit us. All of this is reporting to a committee, because obviously someone's got to approve all this. So we're there, we're going around in houses, so then we decided we had to move on. Let's collect all the data we've got. Let's go and get forms, templates. Let's get people running around to produce lists upon lists of what data we've got. And what are we going to do with that? So we sat there in many meetings, devising this lovely big template. Once again, collegiately, we looked around the sector. We saw what other people were doing. We took all of their work, we put it all together, we made this huge template, but we still had no plan. No one had even mentioned the legal basis. Nobody had actually mentioned, having to have data to do your work. It was all about data is horrible. No one had realised the good part of this, that it was health and safety for data. It was going to protect us as individuals and our customers, and also be a good way of going forward to make sure that in this great world, data is used properly. So what we decided to do then was we got some help. Luckily at the time, in the big panic, somebody we worked with, a company, came in and said, you know what, we're now working with a company. They'll come in and do a free GDPR overview for you. Now the term free really appeals to higher education, unless it comes to fees, because we like charging students lots of money. And so we got the company in. They came in and they sat down to the two working parties and members of the committee and explained GDPR to us. Explained about legal precedents, the way we can use data, what data we should use. And at that point, it all became clear. There was a methodology. There was a plan. The world was not going to end. So what we decided to do was to engage them and work with us to develop our GDPR process and to get us to where we needed to be for the 25th. Not everything, but what we needed to be. George at this time joined us as Deputy Secretary?
Deputy University
Secretary, and was given the charge, the project, because it was never my project, to run this. And what George has done is worked with the organisation and the company that worked with us to put together something that has actually achieved the fact that we came to the 25th of May and we were okay. We didn't panic, we didn't worry, we didn't delete all our data. So that's just a brief little warm-up for George on how we got from the first inklings to today with GDPR. And I hope that's sort of reminiscent of some of your experiences. So I didn't want to dwell on it, but just wanted to let you know that even in higher education, we had the same issues. So I'll hand over to George now to do the meeting presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm going to change it now. Thank you very much. So what Mike has done there is paint quite a picture of disarray in the university, which may or may not be fair. But interestingly, I started at the university in September last year, and I came for my interview in June, and it did come up GDPR, and I said, "Yeah, how's that going?" And they all went, "Yeah, I think we're in really good shape for that." So I'm not quite sure the internal picture was the same as the external picture, but anyway. So as I say, I started in September last year, and one of the first things that I was tasked with was leading the GDPR compliance project. So naturally I was delighted at that prospect, and we were in a position where Civica had done a sort of readiness assessment for us. They'd set out this enormous list of things that we had to do by the 25th of May. It's literally this tool, and we would take it to meetings and we would hang it up and we would say, "This is what we need to do, please give us some money." So we started some project planning in November. We set up a working group that could actually get the job done. So it was people who knew a bit about GDPR and people who knew a bit about the systems and the processes that we were going to change. We have also a GDPR project board that's made up of our sort of senior leadership team. And I think maybe a change has happened here, but generally speaking, I'd say that engagement at board level has been really good in this project. There's a really good understanding of GDPR, really good awareness of why it's important, and most importantly, a willingness to allocate sufficient resources to it. So the general approach was to conduct a sort of data audit, which led to the creation of our processing activities records. And what we found was that we just had a massive information that didn't really link together. So we started data mapping with the help of Civica, and we produced a sort of a risk register for each department, which was a series of discrete tasks that we thought that they needed to do in order to achieve compliance. And really, we took a sort of risk-based approach to GDPR. We know there's a whole range of things that we need to do, but we know know that some of them are more important than others. Some of them open the university up to greater risk than others, and that was what we prioritised. So, I haven't used this yet. There we go. So, at university level, what we did was we focused on policy development and focused on raising awareness of GDPR, and that was both internally and with our suppliers and our collaborators and our students. So we revised our data protection policy and our subject rights access processes, and we rolled out an internal communications plan and some really good training. And obviously we repapered or reproduced our privacy notices, which almost certainly got lost in the flood that ensued just before the 25th of May. I think, as Mike said, we're generally very pleased with where we've got to in the last 6 months, but we're quite keen not to lose momentum, and I'll talk about it a bit more in a little while, but what I'd really like to do, or what I see as the priority, is embedding lasting cultural change around the use of personal data in the organisation. And to do that, we have to capitalise on our institutional awareness, but also public awareness of GDPR. And we kind of have to keep making good use of the project infrastructure. So, what I thought I'd do is talk a little bit about some of the unique challenges we face as a higher education institution, and specifically in terms of data protection. So I think the first thing I'd say is that for an organisation of our size, we have a diverse range of personal data processes going on. To give you an indication, we have about 9,000 registered students, not including collaborations. We have about 1,000 staff, but we have all kinds of data processes going on. So we are a public organisation for a lot of what we do, but we're also a private organisation. So we have conferencing facilities, on-site accommodation, that kind of thing. And we've got all kinds of things going on. We've got a medical centre on campus, we have counselling, we have wellbeing services. I found out the other day the Department of Psychology runs a psychiatry clinic, which was terrifying. And we have a law clinic. So we've got conferencing facilities, we've got a bar, a nightclub, we do weddings, and all of that stuff Mike's responsible for. And then I think most importantly, we do research. So we do participant research. So I guess for me, one of the defining features of a university research environment is sort of freedom, diversity, and the ability to innovate. And arguably regulation of all kinds challenges those things in a certain way. And for a university, the conceptual problem GDPR gives us is how do we ensure that we're compliant with a powerful piece of legislation with entirely legitimate aims on the one hand, whilst also encouraging a diverse, free and innovative research environment on the other. And this isn't a new problem for universities. So over the last few decades, the sector has seen greater regulation, and what's happened is we've generated a more centralised form of administrative control. But what this does is it creates a tension with this notion of academic freedom. Academic freedom being the ability of academics to test knowledge, to explore the realms of information and understanding. And so there's that tension. And I think the other thing to mention is that academic freedom is actually guaranteed in law. It's part of our university constitution, it's part of our standard terms of service. So it's not just an ideological problem that we need to solve, it's a legal problem as well. So I suppose the area in which that tension played out most was in the use of research participant data. So the first thing we did at the beginning of this project is we tried to work out what is research participant data, what kind of things might it include, and we just decided it was as broad as the definition of personal data itself. It could be anything, from the most basic, nondescript information about someone to the most sensitive, most personal data. And I guess the stakes are quite high. Misuse of research data can have enormous consequences for individuals and for communities. And I think this was brought into realisation recently with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and the University of Cambridge, the involvement of researchers in that. And I thought, if we get this wrong, we might be responsible for bringing the next Donald Trump into the presidency. So research data is diverse and it's essential to one of our core functions as a university. We also discovered it goes everywhere. It's everywhere. Academics work with colleagues across the organisation, in other universities and organisations all over the world. And many of these collaborations are ad hoc. And to stifle them, I suppose, would be to stifle the very nature of university culture. So the challenge for us is how do we balance that with our compliance obligations? So what we decided is that our approach would seek to strike that balance. And how we decided to go about this is we would give researchers the things that they needed to be compliant with GDPR and data protection, and then we would pass it over to them and we would say, as individuals, you are now responsible for following these policies we set out and for using these tools that we're giving you. So this involved supporting producing written agreements with third parties from our legal office and from our central research team. Involved supporting producing privacy notices, facilitating anonymisation and pseudonymisation, and providing secure, usable data storage facilities. It also involves awareness raising, both for research staff and more broadly. And we also decided that we wanted to know what was going on as far as possible. And so to avoid creating a new process, academics hate bureaucracy, they hate administration, they want to get on with it, and that's completely fair. So what we wanted to do is bolt GDPR and data protection onto an existing process. So we chose the research ethics process, which is pre-existing in the university, and it's used to assess project proposals from an ethical perspective, and specifically those that make use of human and animal participants. It's well established, and I think importantly researchers understand its importance, and from our perspective it's the most complete record we have of the research that goes on across the organisation. So what we've done is we've adapted that process slightly. We've added in some questions and some expectations around data protection, in the hope that by engaging researchers with that process, we're going to get them to the point where they're compliant without it being a huge faff and without alienating our researchers. So I think initial feedback's been quite positive. Particularly, I think I've had a lot of questions recently about what is the impact of GDPR and new data protection legislation on research, and people value or appreciate the assurances that we're able to give them that they can continue working. I've had more than one person come up to me on a number of occasions saying, I need to delete all my research data now. I said, that's the worst possible thing you could do. So people really do appreciate the information that we're giving them. But I think there are some challenges with the approach, and these are challenges that we need to manage going forward. So one of the reasons we chose the ethics process is because it's well established. It has a gravitas within the university. People, researchers and more broadly, understand the importance of conducting research ethically, and it's part of what makes a good researcher. And I guess one of the reasons for that is because people learn about it from the very beginning of their career as an academic. And so what we're trying to do is introduce GDPR and data protection training for researchers right at the beginning of their research careers. So I guess we're starting with MS or postgraduate taught level and above, but possibly we'll roll that out to undergraduates doing research as well. I think there's a real risk that academics will see this as a burden, and then they will disengage, and then we'll be less able to meet our obligations as an organisation. And colleagues in other departments have had this problem. Perhaps unfairly use health and safety as an example, where we haven't quite been able to sell the importance of it to researchers. and so they haven't engaged in the process as much as we'd like. So the communications issue is really important. I think another challenge for us is the way in which the conceptualisation of what personal data is changing in our society. So in research, there's this sense that research data belongs to the researcher. It's their data set. They take it with them when they leave. They bring it in when they come, and once they're here, they own it. But actually, GDPR is saying it's not yours. We give it to you, but we expect you to use it in the way that we've agreed. It belongs to the data subject, and so there's a real tension there that we need to resolve. There's a few other things. There's this notion of open research data. So this is a direction of travel that the UK research is going in, and the idea is that facilitates open research. It facilitates collaboration. It allows the removal of structural barriers for early career researchers. And there's a tension between making data more open and making it safe. So that's something that we need to resolve going forward. And then the third thing I think is an increase in the commercialisation of research. And perhaps for other organisations this has already happened, but at Roehampton what we're seeing is that that's increasing because we need to diversify our income streams, and because we want to work with industry, because we recognise the expertise that they have. So we need to be careful that commercialisation of research data doesn't impact on the rights of data subjects. So what I've got here are a few reflections, some learning points, some other things that I just thought I'd share with you. The first, I think, is that having external input for our GDPR project has really helped us. At each meeting we have now, I notice a marked increase in the understanding and the level of discourse that goes on about data protection, which is really encouraging. And I'm hoping that we can continue that, and that'll trickle down into the organisation. I guess from my perspective, GDPR has been a really good way to learn about the university. It's personal data goes everywhere, and so learning about that and learning about how we might change some of those processes has been really good for me. There's a few other things. So generally speaking, peer networks in HE are really good. I think perhaps we haven't, or Roehampton hasn't made as good a use of these as we could have with GDPR. And I think one of the reasons for that is that organisations are at different levels of preparedness. They have been for the last year, the last 2 years. And so it's been really hard to collaborate when you're not all quite on the same page yet. And I'm hoping that going forward, now we've all been forced to achieve a similar level of compliance, that we might be able to make better use of that. A second sort of learning point for me is the role of the media in something like GDPR. And my experience has been that the media has drastically oversimplified GDPR. It's overemphasised the rights of data subjects, and it's also overemphasised the obligations of organisations. And I think what's happened is that expectations are unreasonable or unfounded sometimes. And so as an organisation, we can raise awareness with our customers and with our colleagues, but I'm hoping that as the legislation beds in, general awareness in the public will increase as well. I'm just going to move on to that. So when we prepared for today, someone suggested that we might think about whether GDPR has been a burden as an organisation or whether it's been a value to us. And I suppose the obvious answer is it depends who you ask. At a kind of project level, I think what it's done is it's made us more aware of how we use personal data, and it's made us aware of many of the inefficiencies that we have as an organisation. We collect too much, we store too much, and all of that comes at a cost, but it also increases risk. So in going through this exercise, we've been able to resolve some of that. I think for other colleagues, particularly researchers, as I've mentioned, time will tell. If we get the balance right, then perhaps we'll be able to market data protection and GDPR as something valuable and worthy. If we get it wrong, they're going to hate it and we're not going to go through it. So that's something that we need to think about going forward. So just to finish, I thought I'd think about some of our uncertainties going forward. And the first is about whether as an organisation we can capitalise on the awareness of GDPR at the moment, both internally and externally, to enact lasting cultural change in our organisation. And I think if we don't do that, we're going to increase the risk that we face as an organisation, but we're also going to lose the benefit of all the time, effort and money that we've put into it so far. The second relates to a sort of specific uncertainty in the sector that I think we will only resolve in collaboration with other organisations. And this is about whether or not we can continue to process student criminal convictions data. So I don't know how many HE people there are in the room, if any, but UCAS recently stopped asking about criminal convictions, ostensibly because it was more fair to applicants, but I suspect because they didn't want to have to deal with this question. And I guess the question for us is whether we can continue to do that, and if so, how. So that's something we need to get clarity on. And finally, there's a question about student engagement. So the sector has changed a lot in the last 5 years or so. It's become more litigious. Students are more aware of their rights. They're more willing to enforce their rights. They're more willing to make claims for breach of contract. And I suppose what we need to do is work out whether GDPR is going to have an impact on that. I think that remains to be seen. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions, as I'm sure is my.
Hi, thank you for that. Very, very good insight. Yeah, on the point of criminal convictions and your UCAS decided not to go there, has that been examined in the light of the Data Protection Act?
So my understanding is they will stop from the next cycle onwards.
Yeah, have they reviewed that in the light of the Data Protection, which is now law?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
No.
they might need to look at that.
Yeah, I mean,
it will have serious implications.
Yeah, there are reasons beyond GDPR why you would or wouldn't ask, which I think.
Because what's happened is that you've got the GDPR, but you've also got the data protection with Brexit in. We spoke, but yeah. And the Parliament's already given royal assent to the data protection, and that's got bits about cooperation around those areas. So it's in fact, so we've got bits that added on to the European legislation.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're relying on.
Yeah.
But it's not as clear as we would like it to
That's
be.
right, because this thing is going to make it rather tricky.
I'm an alumnus of a university that hasn't contacted me for 40 years. It's just asked me, just told me that I don't need to do anything to stay on their books, which is really interesting. Do you share their view?
We have done the same thing, actually. We decided that we would rely on legitimate interests as our legal basis for processing alumni data.
That's no.
Sorry?
So no, you don't share their view.
What was their view? Sorry, I thought that's what you.
Well, I don't do anything with them. I can stay on the books.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the effect of our decision as well. Is that we've updated our privacy notices, but we haven't asked for opt-in consent.
What does Roehampton do in terms of, you must have flow of data to universities abroad? What about your Erasmus programs or visiting lecturers, external examiners who need access to data? How do you handle that? Do you have an agreement with them, or do you see them as unauthorized third parties, or what is your view on that?
So we're working through quite a long list of third-party agreements with our legal office, and I think we're going to evaluate each one of those on a case-by-case basis. But we're aware of the complexities of that task.
The question was, you mentioned the anonymisation. Did you find that using research information where you would anonymise it as part of the research helped you to sort of get into those areas within the university as far as GDPR?
repeat the question? I'm
So,
very sorry.
I mean, for certain data sets you want to anonymise them before you do the research on them.
Yeah.
So did the people who own those data sets, were they more receptive to the GDPR? Well,
I think so, yes, because they're already in the practice of anonymisation, and what we're saying as part of our guidance to research is if you can do that, then that's preferable to continuing to process personal data. So they have been more receptive to that kind of advice.
Is GDPR on your student curriculum?
It should be, but I'm not going to teach it. Is it on yours?
I think it should be on the students' curriculum because many of them are going to be touching privacy data.
I think what we're saying is, in terms of research, we think of it as an important skill for a researcher in the 21st century.
So the answer is they're not.
Well, no, what I'm saying is I think we're going to introduce that training to postgraduate research.
But it's been on the statute books for 2 years.
There's no time like that.
So can I just say, it's probably covered in professional issues. It's probably covered in professional issues. No, I teach at a university, and one of the topics that we touch on, because of BCS, is professional issues. So it covers legal issues, ethical issues, and so on. And that's where they will cover, probably, I would imagine, keeping behind.
Yeah, that's why it's behind the question.
GDPR.
Yeah.
Well, there's a slightly wider question around academia anyway about just teaching data management generally. Never mind the analytics stuff, the sexy bit, what about those fundamentals around data? And I think there's a lot more to be done there.
Yeah, in terms of your students having rights and they knowing their rights, but by virtual rights, as a university, they are entitled to abide with the rules and regulations of the university.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are you giving them the privilege that they know their rights and they don't know their rights?
So if I understand your question correctly, we're giving them the rights that they're entitled to law, and we're not attempting to minimise those by way of our internal regulations.
And on that ground, that means that they will not abide with the rules and regulations or the doctrines of the university.
But I don't think there's any conflict between their rights under data protection legislation and our regulation. So I think that wouldn't be a problem.
I think, in fact, a lot of the preparation has been to make sure that the university's rules and regulations are in line with GDPR.
Yeah.
So there is no conflict between the rights they have anyway and the as formalised in the student contract, for example.
Yeah, well, I have a reason for that because I have an experience in one of the supports universities and a large one where a student is saying that he didn't do his exams well, and he wants to them to redo his examination based on GDPR. This is his right.
Interesting ground there.
And in life something where he emailed and was threatening them on the basis of GDPR. So that's my own. And the way he said it, it means that if they are going to abide with the rules and regulations of then they still have a right to say that this is my right, I don't want this is what I want.
No, sorry, can I just explain? From a legal point of view, I'm a lawyer, so that might help a little bit. What he's saying is the GDPR gives you certain rights, like, for example, the right to subject access, data portability, etc. Those things are not inconsistent and have never been, because of the Data Protection Act, the GDPR is just an enhancement of the Data Protection Act, which has been in force for years and years, since the 1998. So basically there's no conflict at all between those things. It'd be interesting to know what legal grounds, well, not if it's a confidential thing, obviously, this person is doing this on, because they might have a perception that their rights have been breached, but they'd be wise to go and see a lawyer before launching off, because they might be on very shaky grounds.
I think I completely agree. One thing that may happen is that students have an unreasonable expectation of their rights, which might ultimately end up in a request or a claim being rejected, but uses up all kinds of staff time as we try and deal with it and we try and process it. So that in itself is a risk for us.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
I think also that goes, to go back to my opening slides, we go right back to the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All the principles are there. This isn't a sudden step change. This is a refinement of a path of a journey we're already on. So, yeah, I think there's probably some interesting ground for people on there. Anyway, we're about to go to the break. There's one last question. Then to look forward to it.
I got a very practical question for you in regards to research and research data.
Yeah.
So I've been sitting on both sides of the fence. So for the last 2 years, I've been doing nothing else in GDPR. But a couple of years ago, I did a PhD, and I had to do, so my supervisor had asked me, please, can you do a survey? So obviously, I was completely on my own, so I had to identify individuals to be included in my survey. So I went to events, I captured business cards, and then I sent out an email with my questionnaire to literally 200 or so people. And there was one individual who sent an email to the university and complained. This was more than 10 years ago. I knew that I probably would need some consent, but then I implied some legitimate interest because I met all these individuals at different conferences like this event. So how do you, so two questions actually. So whom do you consider as the data controller for research data? Is it the student or is it the university? That's my first question. And my second question is, so what are you planning to do in order to support research students that are asked, like I've been asked many years ago, do a survey? I mean, obviously they need to identify some data subjects and then reach out to them. So what are you planning?